On their way to the moon, the astronauts of Apollo 17 captured this rare image of the full Earth, centered on Africa, birthplace of humanity. This is an ancient land. The Nile River still flows northward to the Mediterranean, just as it did when the Great Pyramids rose on the plain of Giza. Eastward, the Red Sea splits and encircles the Sinai Peninsula, dividing two continents and separating Egypt from the sacred sites of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Trade routes once ran northward from incense kingdoms at the southwestern tip of the Arabian Peninsula. Caravans bringing frankincense and myrrh traveled up the eastern coast of the Red Sea, past the Gulf of Aqaba, and northward toward the Dead Sea. Great leaders such as King David, King Herod, Jesus, and John the Baptist walked the paths of the Dead Sea. Prophets of the Hebrew Bible recounted tales of the infamous Sodom and Gomorrah. Egyptians used minerals extracted from the Dead Sea for embalming their mummies, and Aristotle wrote about its remarkable waters. No seaweed or plants surround the Dead Sea. No fish or swimming creature of any kind lives in its waters. But the Dead Sea lives through stories preserved in its cliffs and caves and in the stars overhead. Here, ancient scrolls chronicle time's passage by motions of the sun and the moon, while rock and sand retain a living record of a place as timeless as the star patterns above.
The Dead Sea is the lowest point in a rift valley extending northward from the Red Sea to Syria. From sea level at the Gulf of Aqaba, the valley drops over 1,300 feet to the Dead Sea shore. Mountain ranges border the valley on both sides, challenging caravans bringing the wealth of the East to the markets of Europe. The Dead Sea anchors a land rich in physical and spiritual wealth. Just east and south of the Dead Sea lies Petra, capital of the Nabatean trading empire. Spices from the east and south traveled over the desert to ports on the Mediterranean Sea on their way to markets in Europe. Each caravan enjoyed the protection of the Nabateans and increased the wealth of their hidden city. A long canyon winds into the crumpled mountains east of the Dead Sea. Natural hues of red and gold give little indication of the splendor within, the glory of ancient Petra, the Nabatean city of rock. Facades of rock mark the doorways of tombs that once looked down on a thriving city. Drainage channels along canyon walls brought water into cisterns buried under the plazas. This fabled sandstone city rose to power at the same time that the Dead Sea Scrolls were written, fading into desert myth after the Roman conquest, when trade routes shifted from land to water. Its people, the Nabateans, may have become the Bedouins, who kept the city hidden and protected even now.
Mountains west of the Dead Sea are home to another great and ancient place, perhaps the most cherished of all cities, Jerusalem, sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. At the center of Old Jerusalem is the Dome of the Rock, built at the place where the patriarch Abraham stood to sacrifice his son Isaac, where Solomon built his temple, and where Muhammad is said to have ascended to heaven